Now, warthogs are vegetarians, but they are vicious. With those tusks, they can really hurt human beings. And so this is not a friendly interaction normally to interact with a warthog. And then after she stings him, she doesn't plan to eat him. She actually wants to plant her babies inside of his body and let them eat him while he's still alive after they hatch. This is one of those times where you go, how could a loving God create something like this? Now, there's something I've been holding back telling you guys about. And before I read the big question, I want to tell you about it. Redeem Academy. Hey, what is up, Science Squirrels? Johnny here with Redeem Academy. I'm here to help you get the most out of your education while giving God all the glory he deserves. Today, we are on lesson 4 of the ecology unit, and we're going to be talking all about community interactions, which are interactions between populations inside of a community. Today, I'll be going over 3 things. I'll be talking a little more about predation and competition. I'll be talking about the 3 types of symbiosis, and I will be going over God's ultimate plan for suffering. Now, there's something I've been holding back telling you guys about, and before I read the big question, I want to tell you about it. Oh, my pen. So, I've been hiding a part of who I really am from you guys. I'm actually a totally hairy man, and I've just been pretending to be bald. Today's episode is going to be my true self. Okay, big question. Will there always be suffering in God's creation? Hey, if you need a notebook, you can get one at redeemacademy.org. Let's get going. Okay, so today we'll be going over 3 ways that populations interact in a community, and one of those ways is going to have 3 other ways built inside of it. But before we do that, I want to do a little review of where we've been. First off, a group of living things that are similar and can mate with each other to produce fertile offspring. Remember, this term is a species. And a group of the same species living in the same area is a population. Now, those 2 terms should take you all the way back to lesson 1, where we had individuals and populations. Now, we've just spent the last couple lessons just talking about populations, population growth, and then things that limit population growth and cause it to stop growing. And now today, we're moving on to the next level of that diagram, to the community level. And so we see here in this image, the community level includes not just one population, but multiple populations together. And so remember, all the different populations living in the same area is called a community. And we're going to start talking about ways that communities interact. We're going to start with one of my favorite all-time videos, foxes hunting voles in the snow.
It's said red foxes have such acute hearing, they can hear a mouse from 30 meters away. By comparing minute differences between sounds hitting the right and left ears, he can pinpoint exactly where his prey is. And then he leaps. Becoming the perfect pouncer requires trial and error. Sometimes it's a long shot. But when they get it right, the fantastic fox can catch a mouse beneath 1 meter of snow.
Got him. How amazing is that his little ears can like triangulate where the vole is under the snow. So that's just one example of a predator-prey relationship. Probably my favorite thing in watching animal documentaries is watching the predators go after the prey. Okay, and so here's our example with our fox's head in the snow. Predation. When animals hunt and eat other animals, we call that predation. All right, next up, what are these two hermit crabs doing? So this is actually a really cool video because they also show you how they get some of this footage. This hermit crab rolling up right here is a robot, and he's got a camera in his shell. And so this is how they film some of these things without scaring away the animals. Now, a lot of times hermit crabs are actually going to have to fight or compete over shells. But in this case, there's this really interesting lineup that happens where the crabs actually sort themselves by size and wait for everybody to show up. Now, this happens when a bigger shell shows up on the beach, so everybody lines up at the same time. I'm going to let the narrator take over here.
They wait until everyone is assembled. Then the house swap begins. The largest leaves his old home and moves into the vacant shell next door. Then the next size down takes over the shell he left behind. And so it goes on in order of size.
Major upgrade.
Most are content with their new home, although one seems to have house envy.
And that one goes after the camera. So pretty amazing that these hermit crabs, they don't live in shells that their bodies make. Those shells that you just saw are made by snails. And snails secrete really hard minerals that they get from the ocean that build those shells. But then when the snails die, the hermit crabs move in and take over. So this is an example of competition, and this could be between multiple species of hermit crabs. It doesn't have to be all the same species. And so this is an interaction between different populations of hermit crabs competing for space or resources. And there's all kinds of interesting resources creatures have to compete for in nature, even something as unusual as another animal's shell.
It's free real estate.
So here are boys fighting over a shell, another example of competition. Now, both competition and predation were in the last lesson about factors that slow down population growth, but today we're just seeing it as an example of ways that populations interact inside of a community. Now that moves us on to our third way that communities interact, which is called symbiosis. When organisms try to use the same limited resources, that's competition. But now you're going to see examples of what's called symbiosis. And this is totally new for you. It's a close relationship between two different kinds of organisms where at least one organism benefits. So while we watch these videos, you should be thinking, who's benefiting and what's happening to the other member? Are they benefiting? Is it hurting them? Or is it really no effect on them? These guys on the screen are mongooses, and we're going to be watching them interact with a warthog.
Banded mongooses are very social. They groom each other daily and raise their offspring together. They're also very hungry. Thanks to the heat, the warthogs eventually get left high and dry. At the same time, the mongooses are approaching. While warthogs are vegetarians, banded mongooses dig around for insects buried in the soil.
Now, warthogs are vegetarians, but they are vicious. With those tusks, they can really hurt human beings. And so this is not a friendly interaction normally to interact with a warthog.
Next to the warthogs, these carnivores look tiny. But they're about to fulfill a big and very important role. The little predators approach the warthogs carefully and start searching their hides for parasites. But not everywhere is easily accessible to a banded mongoose. And so the warthogs eventually give their helpers a hand by lying down on the ground. It's a sign of great trust, which soon has crowds of mongooses clambering all over the warthogs, providing full-body treatments entirely free of charge.
It honestly reminds me of my teenage sons. They can be a little fierce sometimes, but when their mom, I mean the mongooses aren't the warthog's mom, when their mom starts scratching their back or rubbing their sore leg from track, they just turn into a warthog who lays down and lets the spa treatment begin.
The beauticians are savoring their meal. But examples of cleaning symbiosis don't just happen down at ground level.
I could just go through the animal kingdom. Fish, there's a special species of fish called a cleaner fish, and it literally just cleans other fish and bigger things than fish. I put one in your workbook that's a hippo. There's a hippo that will just open its mouth, and these, I think they're like barbell fish, they come in and they just chew all in its mouth and get all these little bits of food out of its mouth, and they chew all over its body. So one organism cleaning another organism, just all over the animal kingdom you see this. And it's an example of what's called mutualism, where one organism benefits and the other organism benefits. Everybody benefits. And this is like an amazing picture, I think, of how God originally intended creation to work. That there wasn't going to be all this death and killing and suffering, but there were going to be more symbiotic relationships between creatures. And there are a lot of symbiotic relationships between creatures that we're going to see today. So, mutualism. This is where both benefit. One more time, a close relationship between two species where both organisms benefit. Mutualism. All right, now notice these barnacles growing on this turtle. Maybe you don't know what a barnacle is. You're about to find out.
This green sea turtle is providing free transportation to a few hitchhikers. The turtle was seen swimming with these passengers off the coast of Dahab, Egypt. Sea turtles often have organisms that attach themselves to their shell. Some are in fact parasitic, while others are commensal, posing no threat to the turtle. Crabs, barnacles, shrimp, oysters, algae, and other life forms have all been seen on the turtles. The non-parasitic organisms mainly use the turtle as a form of transportation.
Isn't that amazing? I don't know what kind of fish that was attached to the turtle, but the big white pancake looking thing with creepy crawly tentacles coming out, that was a barnacle. And a barnacle is actually an arthropod, which means it's kind of like an insect, but it builds a shell, and then it's a filter feeder, and it sticks its hands out, or whatever those tentacle things are, they're not hands, and it grabs particles from the water and is able to filter the water and eat what it needs. Now, attaching yourself to a turtle is a really safe place to be. Not a lot of predators are going to come around a turtle, and turtles live for 80 years, so you might have like a nice 80-year home, free mortgage, if you're a barnacle. In general, it's not believed that the barnacles hurt the turtle, although there probably are extreme cases where it does. But when it's not hurting the turtle, it's an example of what's called commensalism, where one organism benefits and the other is unharmed. In this case, we're calling this commensalism. Commensalism is a close relationship between two species where one organism benefits and the other is not helped or harmed. Now, if those barnacles, I've seen videos where the barnacles grow on the turtle's face and it looks like, yeah, this turtle's probably suffering, that would get us into the territory of our next example of symbiosis. All right, now if you just look at this, who do you think's going to win? Probably the tarantula giant spider. Well, he's going up against what's called a tarantula hawk, or a tarantula hawk wasp. It's going to get real. Watch this. All right, so here we go. You can see this little wasp isn't so little, and she is coming in full offensive. The tarantula seems to be unimpressed. I've heard that the wasp is actually trying to hypnotize the tarantula with her antenna. I don't know if there's any truth to that, but she is definitely taking the offensive position in this fight, and the tarantula is doing not much about it. Now, if the tarantula knew her intentions, he should run, because she wants to sting him, and her sting will paralyze him, and then after she stings him, she doesn't plan to eat him. She actually wants to plant her babies inside of his body and let them eat him while he's still alive after they hatch. Just lovely. So, after a few tumbles on the ground, she eventually is going to successfully sting him and paralyze him with her venom. That seems to be happening right now. Her little abdomen is getting the work done, and this tarantula is not going to be moving for long. He's looking pretty paralyzed. And now we see the wasp dragging his paralyzed carcass back to her den. Once the babies hatch inside of the tarantula's body, they will eat their way out, and that will be the end of his existence. Awful. This is one of those times where you go, how could a loving God create something like this? And I would say, the Bible tells us that thorns and thistles came after the fall. And I have to believe that these sort of nasty things are post-fall, that they have come about since sin entered the world. That's how I understand things like this. They're actually kind of cool, but also terrible. And we call this natural evil. And I have to believe somehow that God did not ordain this to originally exist, but this is part of the curse that's on creation. And I'm actually going to talk about that more at the end of the video. Kind of awesome, kind of terrible, all at the same time. This is a wonderfully terrible version of parasitism. Again, parasites. And this type of parasitism where your babies feed on the thing you implant them in is, we call the hawk wasp a parasitoid. So it's a unique case of parasitism. Our close relationship between two species where one organism benefits and the other organism is harmed is called parasitism. All right, well, that brings us back to the big question. Man, come on! Will there always be suffering in God's creation? So I spent a little while on suffering last time, longer than I spent on a big question, and I just want to finish off the topic of suffering today because we see it so much in the way creatures interact with each other. So Paul talked about why the world has suffering when he wrote in Romans. And he says here in verse 18, I'm going to read like 6 verses here. Yet what we suffer now is nothing compared to the glory he will reveal to us later. So he talks about how we're suffering as Christians, and really those first century Christians were suffering. For all creation is waiting eagerly for that future day. And I kind of abbreviated out a few pieces of the topic just to keep it fast. So that's why you see like ... right there. Against its will, all creation was subjected to God's curse, but with eager hope. So we see in the book of Genesis, God is communicating to us in the first chapters that the world was good. God made a good world, but the world was subjected to a curse. Creation was subjected to a curse. He finishes off that creation was subjected to a curse, but with hope, verses 21 through 23, the creation looks forward to the day when it will join God's children in glorious freedom from death and decay. Remember, my big question, will there always be suffering? There's this hope that there won't always be suffering. And Paul talks about this hope of a day with no suffering. And he says, for we know that all creation has been groaning. Creation is suffering, it's groaning like a woman who's about to give birth. But the good thing about a woman who's about to give birth, she's suffering, but something very good is coming next. After the suffering, you get a baby. And so right now the world is in childbirth, waiting for the good thing that's coming next. Verse 23, and that we believers also groan. As Christians, we've grown. We long for our bodies to be released from sin and suffering. We are still under this curse of sin, even though we've been born again, even though we're new creations spiritually. Physically, we still have bodies that suffer. And we too wait with eager hope for the day when God will give us, and I skipped through this other portion of what he's talking about, And then he says, the new bodies he's promised us. So we as Christians know there's a future day coming. And one of the things we know and we talk about a lot as Christians is like there's a resurrection. We're going to have new bodies. But it's not just us, Christians, who are going to be changed at the end of time when Jesus comes back to rule and reign and there's a new heaven and a new earth. Have you ever heard that phrase? New heaven, new earth. Let's look at a couple passages about that real quick. Isaiah 11:6 talks a little bit about this. Isaiah chapter 11, he's talking about this root of Jesse that's going to come. And the root of Jesse was David's father, and David's future descendant is Jesus, the Messiah. And so look what he has to say about this time when the Messiah is going to rule and reign. He says, in that day, the wolf and the lamb will live together. What? Wolves hunt lambs, right? The leopard will lie down with the baby goat. Leopards eat baby goats. The calf and the yearling will be safe with the lion, and a little child will lead them all. Little children are not safe around predators right now. Now, some Christians interpret this like totally metaphorically, like this isn't literal. But other Christians interpret this like there's literally going to be a change to the way the world is, that there is no more animal suffering on the earth when Jesus is fully on his throne as our king. I like the latter interpretation, but I'm not an enemy of someone who doesn't. And finally, we get to see a picture of this new heaven and new earth in Revelation chapter 21. Check this out. And I'm just taking one verse. You should read the whole chapter of Revelation 21. But this is a time, in the first verse, it says, there's a new heaven and a new earth, and God is reigning with his people, and he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death or sorrow or crying or pain. All these things are gone forever. So suffering is real right now, but it's temporary. God's final plan is not for creation to permanently suffer, but to restore creation and to fill it with his presence and his knowledge. And he will create a new heaven and a new earth where he dwells with us together. I don't know of another way of understanding the world than Christianity that puts that all together in a way that makes sense. Christianity is the explanation for why the world is the way it is and how it's going to be made right. I hope this lesson was good for you. Peace.